So hello and welcome to the SJE Woodworks YouTube channel. This is my first ever video, so big thank you to everyone who's looked in. It's a Christmas themed one because today I'm going to show you how I made this, which is a Christmas ornament, and the Christmas ornament is for Carl Jacobson and Alan Stratton's 2015 Christmas Ornament Wood Turning Challenge. So it's all been made on the lathe behind me, which is an Xmas Tools lathe. It has a little bit of a twist. Obviously it has a standard kind of Christmas ornament type theme, but if you turn on the battery pack, which is attached to it, which will be hopefully hidden in the Christmas tree, hopefully if you look close to that you can see that it is lit up through a series of small holes. And it cycles through different colours, which you may or may not be able to see really well in this. It goes through blue, red, etc, etc. So I will take you through the process for doing this. So let's get started.
So I'm starting with a piece of beech that came from France originally, about a year ago. As you can see, it's pretty spalted, but hopefully it will turn into a decent piece of wood. I like the figuring that's in it and the colouring. So I'm going to turn it down to round first of all. I didn't bother trimming it up before I put it on the lathe because it's not a huge piece, and I thought it would turn out perfectly fine.
Have yourself a merry little Christmas. Let your heart be light.
You can already start to see some of the figuring in there, which hopefully will look really good on the finished ornament. Now this is going to form the two hemispheres of the sphere for the ornament that I'm making. So just need to get it down to a rough cylinder. That's about what I have to first of all.
Have yourself a merry little Christmas. Make the Yuletide gay. From now
Next I'm going to use parting tool just to smooth off the ends, straighten the ends down, and then I will put a tenon on it and mount it onto my chuck. You can see the figuring pretty well. What I can also see is there's some really bad, really punky wood on the end. I'm hoping that's not going to cause too much of a problem as I go through it. So my bowl gouge, I'm just turning down the ends and starting to turn out that sphere shape that I want. See in this photo, I think there's been some form of worm activity in this wood. There's quite a few little holes and little lines in there, which is fine, and hopefully they will actually just make it look a bit more attractive at the end, give the wood a bit more interest. Obligatory slow motion shot, just to show that the movement of the bowl gouge over and trying to get the final sphere shape. I'm just using a square nose scraper to get the final shape on the sphere. As you can probably see, I've left a tenon on each end. That's just so I can mount each individual piece into the chuck, so I can flip this over when I part the two hemispheres and start to shape out the middle of them. I can mount either side back onto the chuck easily enough. As I said before, it's pretty punky, so adding some super glue to the really bad areas just to try and stabilise them a little bit. And make sure that it doesn't come apart when I sand it. Also give it a bit more strength because I'm probably going to turn the walls down pretty thin for the final project for what I'm trying to achieve. Over to a bit of sanding now. I want to get a fairly decent finish on this now because once I've parted it and it's been turned really thin, I'm not going to be able to do very much. So I'm just starting to work on that at the moment. The usual, more sanding, keep going.
shine
this point I decided I'm going to part it off, so I've got my thin parting tool. I'm just going to separate the two down. Remove the tailstock so I can grab hold of the piece that's going to fall off as I cut away with the parting tool. Now the first thing, before I start using a gouge to remove the material, I'm just going to use a forcing a bit on my drill chuck to take away some of the material in the centre. Given how punky the wood is, I've decided that I'm going to, well, it's good practice to always sharpen your tools, but I'm going to give this one an extra sharpen before I start removing material from the centre, because otherwise it's just going to end up tearing out really badly. So it's pretty sharp now. So getting rid of that material, just roughly removing as much as I can to start off with. Using a couple of different tools here, a couple of different bowl gouges, and parting tool just on the edge, just to get that down as thin as I can. So you can start to see it's getting pretty thin now. The only problem I've noticed there, you can probably see, is that I've got a bit of a split in the edge because it's so thin. So I'm just filling in that with some super glue. This is the second hemisphere. Not forcing a bit this time, just a drill piece. It doesn't really matter which. It's much the same process here of hollowing out, just using the bowl gouge to remove as much material and get it down to the same thickness and profile as the other hemisphere. Quick and easy.
May your dreams be merry and bright.
I'm going to add a hole through the centre, which will be for the cable to go through. Now it's onto a different piece of wood, and this is turning the finial to go on the top of the ornament. So usual process, first of all turn it down to a cylinder. I've got it straight mounted into my chuck just to make life a bit easier. As you just saw there, there was a bit of a split in the wood. I've just taken a huge lump off with my roughing gouge, but that shouldn't be a problem. I think I can turn it down to very thin anyway and get what I need from it. So now I'm just using the drill chuck to put a hole all the way through, which is for the cable to go through for the lights inside. And the picture just shows what the finial should look like. So I'm just going to quickly mark up roughly where I think the cut should be, just using the edge of the parting tool. And then I'll just work the profile with a small bowl gouge down to the right shape.
May your days be merry and bright, and may all
It has to be a bit thicker than other ones probably, just because it's got the hole running through the middle. I might have made it thinner otherwise, but I've got to run the cables through there.
your Christmas has be white.
And that's the finished profile. So lots of sanding, I think that's just the last bit, and some friction polish to give it a bit of a shine, which as always brings out a lovely colour to the wood. I've parted it off and that's finished. Now I've put the one of the hemispheres back on with the tenon I turned earlier and mounted it into the chuck, and I'm just going to separate this one off completely.
Time for parties, time for celebration, people dancing,
And there it is.
all night long. Time for presents
I've now put the two together
and exchanging
and I'm just trying to sand them both to exactly equal sizes now. It's just held in place by the pressure of the tailstock, pushing one hemisphere into the other one. And that's it, sanded down, so as you can see they're pretty good approximation of each other, and friction polish on these to give them a shine. It's a nice coloration on there, which is what I want.
candlelight, room is swaying.
I decided, having looked at them together, that actually I wanted to put a small contrasting kind of mahogany piece in between the two, just to give it a bit of extra colour and to match the finials. So I've just turned down a very small ring to the right size, which I'll put in between the two hemispheres. And now I'm just quickly turning a small finial to go on the base. And that's all the parts done that make up the actual ornament. Now I'm going to use my Dremel to just put a few very small holes, tiny ones, into each of the bits of the ornament, into each of the hemispheres, and that's for the light to shine through. And now just a quick glue up on the pieces. So I'm putting on the lower finial with a bit of glue and just a little super glue so it's held in place more quickly, and I don't have to hold it for ages. Whilst that's drying, time for a bit of soldering. So I've got soldered some longer wires onto the connector that came with my LED strip, because those wires have to run through the longer of the finials. So the battery pack's outside, so I'm just quickly wiring that on. And now I've put those through, as you can see, and I've put some glue in place to hold that finial down. And I'm just taping it in place rather than holding it. And now those wires are through, I need to add the same connector on the other end. I have to apologise for my makeshift way of holding the connector and the fact that I'm using a pyrography tool to do my soldering as opposed to a proper soldering iron, but it seems to work.
Oh, the weather outside is frightful.
And that's the small piece of wood with a LED strip mounted on it, which I will glue in place into the bottom hemisphere. Good use of an egg cup to hold it there.
It doesn't show signs of stopping.
And having done that, I've glued up the ornament, and I'm holding it in place with some tape. And as you can just see from turning on the battery pack, you can see the light starting to shine through. And that's basically it. That's pretty much the finished ornament. And there you have it. As you watch the video, you can hopefully see some of the colours changing, and you can see how the light shines through the very thin bottom hemisphere, which is kind of interesting as well. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you found it interesting. And as I said, this is my entry for the 2015 Christmas Ornament Competition. Thanks very much for watching, really appreciate it.
Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow.